Introducing Minor Wisdom Quintet.
1, 2, a skidda-didda-doo.
Minor Wisdom.
It's episode 100, baby. Oh, yeah. So excited because I finally have Billy Dragoo on the podcast. Not that he's been skirting me by any means, but I just haven't reached out to him. And I got Annie, and of course she was a proponent for Billy being on. And I thought, there's no better, and he won't agree with this, there's no better guest to have on my 100th episode than Billy Dragoo. And are there 100 interviews? No, there aren't, because I think I had one or two soapbox podcasts, plus I've had a few with Jay Thomas about WrestleMania. Technically they're interviews, but anyway, so this is the 100th episode, and I'm so, it's crazy that I've done 100 of these now, because I don't feel like I've done 100. However, I can remember when I did my first, and I can remember the first few, and I can remember thinking, when I got Dr. Diane Carr on, that why is she coming on this? And then Philip Taylor agreed to be on, and I've just had so many people on here. And again, I've told many of my guests this. I do this very selfishly, and I think I've mentioned it on here too. I do this very selfishly because I get to know a lot of people that I personally have wanted to get to know, and it carries over into a fun digital realm known as podcasting. And so because of the coronavirus in this past year, it hasn't been really slowed down. I think I've taken 2 weeks off from putting out podcasts. So it's been so much fun. And I know that my monotone voice could never tell you the type of emotion that I'm actually feeling, but in my brain, I'm just a whirlwind of emotion right now, and my voice is going all over the place, but really I know that it's not, and it's just very monotone. Anyway, I digress. My school is being quarantined for the next week, so I will be pantless whilst teaching online to my students. They won't know that, and it's like the one time that it's okay for a teacher to be pantless, when we're teaching online around their students. I know that that's probably not the best thing to say and put out there in the world, but it is true. I mean, it's true. Don't knock it. Don't knock it. So I will be at home for the next week. Our school is quarantining not because there are a lot of positive cases, but because there are a lot of people that are required to be in quarantine. So we are understaffed right now. Even a lot of our administration is out. So it just is what it is, Speaking of the coronavirus, I didn't put this on Facebook or Twitter because some people get backlash for this, and I understand why, but also, if you have the opportunity, take it. But I did get vaccinated. My wife and I got vaccinated, and you are allowed to, at least with this particular one, say that you want to get it because you are a teacher, because you're an educator. However, my sister registered me without me asking her to, and she registered my wife. And when she texted me and said, I got you these times at Minute Maid Park, which ended up being just an absolute hellhole. But when she got us the times, she said, I could have marked you as a teacher, but I marked you as obese because, well, you're fat. And those of you that have siblings, it doesn't stop even when you're in your late 30s, and in her case, early 40s, because she's older than me, way older than me, and also not nearly as smart as me, not nearly as handsome as I am, or pretty, whatever you want to call it. I did get the better genes. She is the black sheep, the inferior one. But anyway, again, I did get vaccinated. I'm very excited. So one little story, excuse me, I just hit my mic. One story that came out of the vaccination, other than Minute Maid Park not knowing how to handle a big crowd, which was kind of weird, question mark. But anyway, maybe because they haven't done it in a while. But anywho, I sat down to finally get my shot, and I had only waited 2.5, 3 hours to get it, but I'm lucky I got it, so I'm not complaining about that. And it was a fireman. A fireman was administering the shot, and I made small talk because that's what my people do. And by my people, I mean products of my father. So two of us, and I was like, "Oh, where are you stationed?" and made small talk with him. And then he saw that it said teacher. The reason I'm here right now is because I'm a teacher. And he said, "Oh, where do you teach?" I told him, and then he goes, "Hey, thank you for your service." And I looked at him like he was crazy. And I said, "What? Thank you for your service. You're a firefighter. If my school was on fire, I would be running out of it while you are running towards it to put it out. Thank you." So anyway, there's this perception out there, I guess, amongst firefighters that teachers are the ones to thank. And our job is not hard, and in the grand scheme of things, it is a difficult time right now in our profession because we're trying to make adjustments, or at least for theater teachers, every teacher really, but especially for theater teachers. How do we do theater unless you're certain schools that think it's a hoax? But it's just crazy to think that there's a firefighter out there, that at least one, I'm assuming there are more, that think that teachers are the heroes. And I'm sure the firefighters think, "Oh, we're just whatever. It's just firefighting." Teachers, the same thing. Some of us, some of the humble ones, are just thinking that too. So it's fun. Speaking of humble ones, again, having Billy Dragoo on, my story with Billy, the first time I ever met Billy was actually, he was a clinician for me, and at that time, Claudia and Bobby were not together yet, Clobby, as we call him. But it was at Lamar Consolidated High School, and he came in, and I really never knew him. And it was the first show that I cut myself. It was Comic Potential, and sorry, not Comic Potential, great show too, Epic Proportions. And I cut it myself, and Billy wasn't Billy wasn't a huge fan of the cut. I can remember that well. I'm not knocking him because the cut was not very good. It only included things that I found funny, not necessarily that told the story. But it was a great experience, and the kids really, really enjoyed getting feedback from Billy because it was very similar to my energy when I give notes as well. So it was familiar to them, but the notes were better because I'm not a director, and they it was one of those things, and we've all been through this, where the kids hear the same note uh, from somebody else, but they feel like they act like it's the first time they've ever heard that note, and you're just looking at them like, I tell you, anyway, moving on, So that was my first Billy experience, and from then on, many run-ins. That sounds negative, but many great opportunities to get to know Billy over the past few years, and Annie as well. Two sweethearts of a people, and from what I understand, because I'm assuming maybe you're not listening to this actually, Billy, because it's your actual episode, but Billy listens with Annie every weekend, so they're like some of my best fans. But he may maybe he chose not to listen to this because it's him. He this is his interview. But all is well at the moment with Annie, I believe. She can obviously correct things, but a lot of us are friends with her on Facebook. If you're not, try getting to be her friend and follow her journey. But right now, things are health-wise, I believe things are getting better. And I know that Austin ISD has granted her some time still at home, finally coming to their senses a little bit, I guess, if I could say that. Hopefully I don't get sued. But I'm following that story very close. So I'm very happy to tell you that there is a little bit of good news right now with that. Speaking of good news, this one's a long one because I wanted to talk to Billy for a while, and it paid off. We do get into some UT football talk. My father went to UT, so I was raised a Longhorn fan, and I'm no longer one, but no longer, the Longhorn. Anyway, but this was before they fired Tom Herman. So I think his name is mentioned in here, but we recorded this before they fired him, so they've kind of moved on, Sarkeesian. So please enjoy this really fun, kind of all over the place a little bit, but we talk a lot about one act play, chat with, he won't say it, but the Texas high school theater legend, Mr. Billy Dragoo?
I grew up in a little town called Sinton, Texas. Blake, do you know where that is?
I have never heard of it until you just said it. No.
Okay. Well, it's down on the coastal plains. It's about 30 miles north of Corpus Christi. A place so flat you can stand on a beer can and see the back of your own head. There's not a lot to do there. It's a town of 5,000 or so. At the time I went to school there, it was a 3A school. It's now 4A. And I did the usual elementary school plays, Pinocchio in first grade and George Washington and that stuff. But my first real exposure to theater, I guess, came through the one act play. My older brother, I have two brothers, but my older one, when he was a freshman, got involved with the UIL one act play. And it just so happened they made it all the way to the state meet and ended up placing third, actually, with the production of To Kill a Mockingbird. And I was in seventh grade, and so I went to the contests. And then the next year, when I was in eighth grade, they did the great cross country race, and they made it to state again. So I went to all those contests. And then my freshman year, I auditioned for Persephone, and I was very lucky to get a small role, and we made it to state. So we never made it to state again. My sophomore year, we didn't get out of zone, and in fact, we never got out of district again. But seeing, I mean, that was the only art available to us, theatrical art. Even Corpus Christi, which at the time was 180,000 maybe. I don't remember there being a whole lot of theater there. Certainly, my parents never took us to watch theater. So that's kind of how I kind of got involved. And at my school, we didn't do any theater except for the one act play. We were speech and debate kids. Every, probably 13, 14 weeks of the year, we'd load up on the Yellow Dog bus and roll all over South Texas and Southeast Texas and get our asses kicked by Charlotte Brown and her kids over at Gregory Portland. But, I grew up doing poetry interpretation, prose interpretation, duet acting, debate, and then we had the one act play in the spring, and that was it. So I went to college at UT for no particular reason other than my brother had gone there and I liked the football team. I mean, I tell my kids all the time, in a small town in the 70s, I wasn't even aware that there were schools like Emory or the University of Michigan, other than their football team. Clearly, I mean, I knew if they had a football team, I was a huge and still am a huge college football fan. I knew about the school, but kids didn't go to college. The really sharp kids went to A&M or Texas, and the kids who maybe didn't have those kind of grades went to local community colleges, stuff like that. So, anyway, I went to UT, and I intended to be a lawyer, but you have to declare a major, and I declared theater major, and I spent the next 6 years of my life there, getting 192 hours because I switched majors. um, so anyway, got that degree and became a teacher. I mean, that's the gist of it. There's more to it that really influenced my life, I guess, if you want to hear about that. But that's how I ended up in the
Yeah.
teaching field.
What is it that kind of swayed you towards teaching though? Like, was it that away from the professional world rather than going as a professional, becoming an educator?
I well, at the time I didn't know this, but I never really wanted to be an actor. I really didn't. I mean, I'm an okay actor. I'll learn my lines and I won't hit the furniture, but I never wanted to do that, and I wasn't smart enough or didn't have enough world experience to know that you could actually move to New York City or Chicago and try to, start a theater company and be a director. I mean, that's what, looking back on my life now at 50, almost 58, what I really would love to do is be a professional director. But there was nobody knew how to do that back then, and I wasn't told I could. So I had a very cool drama teacher in high school, and um, I had to get a degree in something, so I really did think, well, I can always make money teaching, and I'll get to direct. So, I hate to say that it's not like I wasn't inspired at all, but that's kind of why I did it, I guess, because I liked the man who taught me. And then I met Ruth Denny, who was the sort of the grande dame of theater. Um, she, as you know, she had started the High School for the Performing and Visual Arts in Houston back in the '70s. She was a legendary high
Yeah.
school director in the '50s at Houston Lamar, and she had taken over the UT drama education program in the, I want to say, mid '70s. I arrived at UT in '81, and you know, it was uh it was what you did. If you didn't want to act, you got involved with drama education,
Right.
and she totally changed my life. She was an incredible woman, and she hooked me up for my student teaching experience with another man who profoundly influenced me, and that was Jerry Worsham, the greatest drama director of all time in Texas. Most people would say, out in Snyder. And she called me into her office one day, my senior year, and she said, we were talking, and she goes, "You know what? I know, I know where you want to student teach." And I said, "You do?" And she said, "Yeah, you want to teach with Jerry." Well, I knew immediately what she meant. And I swear to God, it's almost like this. I'm making this up, but I'm not making this up. Lynn Murray, who was also in charge of student teachers, they kind of did it together. He happened to be walking by her office. She always kept her office door open. And so it literally went like this: "I know where you want a student teach. Where? Where, Mrs. Denny?" "With Jerry." "Over my damn body." He was walking down the hallway and he heard it and he pokes his head in and he says, "That's not going to happen." And then they started fighting, and it did happen. Let's just say
Right.
that it did
Right.
happen. And that was incredible. In the spring of '87, I went out to Snyder and spent a semester there.
Wow. Good for you. Yeah, I mean, I was 5, but anyway.
Oh, oh,
just throw
the
just
dagger.
just throwing that
I,
out
I
there.
wondered how long it would take for that to come out.
Hey, I was alive. So that's good. That's it's funny now that I mean, I'm in my 11th year teaching, and I've got students obviously that have had kids and married and all that kind of stuff, but that doesn't hit me as hard as when I see kids, my freshmen now, that were born the year I graduated college. Like
Yeah.
that's what kills me is like, man, you guys weren't even a thought until I did the same sort of path you did. I took 7 years, so just a little longer, but for the same reason, I kept changing my major. So you're about to say
Yeah,
something.
well, I'm just the age, comment on the age. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't
No.
feel old. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, 57, 58 isn't old, but in the scheme of a career,
Yeah.
I mean, I've been teaching, 32 years, and I'm facing retirement, and you kind of do go, "Wow, oh my God, my first class
Yeah.
is over 50 years old,"
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um,
It's
so
it's fun to look at that stuff. As somebody facing retirement, do you have a plan? Do you have something you want to do? Travel or
well, yes and no. First of all, we have a freshman in high
right,
school,
right,
Sadie, and I don't think I will retire before she
right,
graduates. So I'm looking at least another 3 years. I can retire. I meet the requirements.
right.
Annie wants to move to North Carolina, to Asheville, and I think I'm at a point in my life
Yeah,
where I'm like, why not? I
yeah,
mean, I visited there. It's beautiful. It's kind of like what Austin used to be, they
right.
say, and we have friends there. So I don't know. I don't know if that'll happen, but that's the plan, I think.
Yeah, is Sadie gonna follow in your footsteps? I mean, I know you're a huge you kind of underplayed the UT thing because I know you're a big Longhorn fan. So, but would Sadie follow in those footsteps, or is that something that she's like, whatever? I know Dad went there. That's enough.
Um, well, I have to say, I'm real proud of Sadie. She made all A's this semester, which is really
Yeah,
fantastic, and she's
especially
learning
right
from
now.
home.
Yeah,
But to be honest, and this is nothing bad against my daughter, I don't think she'll have the grades to get in there. Blake, I
right.
don't think I could get in there
Yeah,
now.
yeah, right. Yeah, no, I know. That's
I
I
mean, when I went in '81, if you were in the top quarter of your class, you only needed to score like an 800 on the SAT.
Right.
So, but now, I mean, it's so competitive, and
Right.
I don't think she'll have the grades, but not because she's not smart. She's just she has dyslexia, and uh, learning is difficult for
Right.
her. So, and I also think there's a part of Sadie that would kind of just give me the middle finger about going to my alma mater. you know.
Well, there are some relatively reputable schools in North Carolina too. I'm sure you've heard of Duke. Yeah.
I have.
Yeah, that's good. So that's fun. So one of the things I want to touch on, I guess some of the boring stuff, but also I guess this is a theater educator podcast, but you're kind of well known for being an OAP encyclopedia. And one of the only other people that I've ever met, and I know you know this gentleman, but Bob Singleton is described as being kind of a walking encyclopedia of information. But his information, similar to one of my mentors, Larry Dogschlager, is dated. He's got a lot of information about a small period of time. Same with Larry. It's like if you ask him anything post 1985, he would not. It's like nothing ever existed. So for you, your brain is filled with all this OAP information. I don't want to know any of that stuff yet. What is another spot in your brain that has this kind of housing of information that might be news to some people as far as you know a lot about this particular subject? Does that make sense, that question?
The question makes sense,
Kind
but
of
the answer,
bar trivia question,
yeah. Well, if you asked Annie, she'd say, I don't know
It ain't.
jack about anything. But I don't know. I like to read, and for some reason, trivial type things, stories stick in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't know. When and it goes in phases. When I was younger, I was a baseball fan. I still am a baseball fan, but in the 70s, I was really into baseball, and I was a statistics guy.
Right.
And I think that's why I like the one act play stuff. The history of it fascinates me. I don't know, the numbers. It's like, I guess maybe I should have gone into analytics or
Right.
something. I don't know. But as far as a subject matter, I'm not a savant on anything, not even one act play. I don't know as much as Craig Hurdle. He could
Sure.
probably whoop me in a contest, but I'm trying to think if there's a subject that I know a lot about. I think the answer is no,
Should
not
should
one
Pete
particular
should Pete
subject.
Rose be in the Hall of Fame?
Oh man, these this you're asking questions I enjoy, ethics and morals. I don't know. On his prowess as a player, absolutely.
Right.
Just unequivocally. But it's the whole moral issue. I
Right.
mean, I don't know. Does doing something I would tend to say yes, he does. And here's the reason why. What is the measure of a man? I mean, does doing one bad thing, is that the sum total of your life?
Right.
I love stories like that. That's why I like Law and Order. I like the moral. I like one of my favorite plays, which I'll never get to direct at the high school level, but the History Boys. Where the guy is this incredible teacher, but he also fondles the boys when he gives them rides home on his motor scooter.
Right.
I mean, is that the right thing to do? No, that's a horrible thing to do. That's not good.
Right.
But does that mean he was also not a great teacher? I mean, can you be both? I think that's a very interesting moral question.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I used to have those because I'm a big baseball fan. I'm probably a bigger baseball fan than I am any other sport, and I would have those conversations with my father. So just about that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But he was also a UT guy, big UT football guy, um, and so I kind of understand that passion, I guess. But then my daughter, that's horrible. My sister ruined it by going to A&M. So it's it is
Yeah,
what it is.
well, in our state, those two
Yeah.
schools are so intertwined. I mean, I dated an Aggie for, I don't know, 5, 6 years, and
Yeah.
I don't hate the Aggies. I just hate their football team,
Yeah, right.
you know.
Right. No, it's a very distinct difference. So going back to the OAP thing, you said you like numbers. What is the analytical element of OAP that intrigues you? So, I know this school has a history within this decade of hitting state more often than other schools, but then they sort of fall off. And so, what is, and that's a hypothetical kind of thing. But what is it about the analytics of a fine arts contest that intrigues you? And is it still fine arts if it's become math? That's a two-part question.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't think the contest has become math. I think the math is a part of the history of the contest,
Sure.
and the
Okay.
math meaning, like, look, I I don't want to be defined by one act play. I know a lot of people out there think I'm some cutthroat person who only cares about one act play and stuff, but that's BS. I mean, I am competitive. I grew up with two brothers, and I always say, look, if I'm gonna have a contest against you, I'm gonna try to
Right.
beat your ass and then date your sister.
Right.
I'm that kind of person, right?
Right.
But that doesn't define me. I mean, I've done 121 shows in my career, and only 31 of them, soon to be 32, are one act play. So that's not one act play does not define our department. It does
Right.
not define me. But the reason I'm so enamored of it is because without it, there wouldn't be people like me.
Right.
Because that was the only exposure I had to theater in my small town. And I just find it interesting when you look at the history of how these little schools, you know, I mean, the history of the big schools is important too, but these little schools like Penelope, I don't even know where Penelope is, but they've been to the state meet at least once in 5 different decades.
Right.
That's pretty. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That means somebody somewhere has a knack for doing theater and getting kids in this small town to love theater and love theatrical playmaking, and I find that fascinating. And
Yeah.
then also, it's also like football. If you The analytics of it are that good programs are made by good directors.
Right.
Because you see a 5-year period where X high school was at state 3 times, and then all of a sudden they've never appeared again. But you start delving into it, and you go, oh well, that director, she moved over to this school, and oh looky here,
Yeah.
now they've been to state twice in the last 6 years. I I think it tells a good story about the educators.
Right. Do you think there is a formula? I jokingly say with some of my educator friends, if you have a dude with no shirt on, a big drum, and splashing some water on stage, then you're probably going to make it to state, and that's tongue in cheek. But do you think there
Yeah.
is a formula of some sort? You can't just do really any show. There are some shows that kind of hit well with adjudicators, and some shows that just
Yeah,
don't tell the story as well.
I think that's true. I think what you have to do, y- I don't know. I mean, some of the best shows we've ever done didn't make it to state.
Yeah.
The best show, I think the best show we ever didn't get out of area, but that's the way it goes. I think you have to find your formula. This is just an opinion. I don't have any facts on this, but
Right.
I personally don't think one act play is the time to try something totally new, to stretch yourself. Now, I'm speaking as a director of a 6A program where we do 6 or 7 shows a year. I'm not, it's different when you're at a small school like I grew up in and you only do one show. This may not apply to you, but to me, if you're going to enter a contest, you ought to put forth your best work. And I'm sorry, but it we would not fare well if I decided to try my hand at commedia during
Right.
one act play season. That
Right.
would be a recipe for disaster.
Right. I would like to see it actually. now
Oh,
now
I
that you
wouldn't.
now that train wrecks for people are always kind of intriguing. So it's like, now it might be interesting.
Well, if you wanted to see a train wreck, you could have seen our Tom Jones in
Uh-oh.
'05.
Okay. Well, we want we I
Oh
oh
six,
oh
oh
so-
six.
okay, yeah. Don't want to throw those '05 kids under the bus there. What? So
No, because '05 was the best show we've ever done, actually,
that
probably.
was that your area show? Yeah.
Yeah, Anna in the Tropics.
Okay. Why do you think that show? And I don't want you to throw anybody, an adjudicator under any bus, virtual bus or metaphorical bus, but why is it that you think that it just were there shows that were just better than you, or was it just something didn't click that day, or
Um, I did not see any shows at that contest. I will tell you, many people thought that we would advance, and particularly Natasha Tollison, her show would advance. Neither one of us did, and I don't think either one of us were even alternates. I won't name the judge, but I don't think he judges anymore. But I will tell you, um, in the actual judges meeting, he said, I drove in from West Texas. I'm just really exhausted, and I'm just looking for something that'll keep me awake." Well, on in the tropics, although I thought it was really, really strong, it's not
yeah,
flashy and lots of movement and stuff. And neither was her show. So I don't know. I mean, but it is what it is.
yeah,
I don't. That's that's the whole thing. You can't judge yourself by whether or not you won a one act play contest,
right,
because my students have failed to advance 24 times in there's been 24 times when we were not the winner. I mean,
right,
ultimately, who can be a winner? I mean, there's only, if you consider first, second, and third place as winners, there's only 3 winners
right,
in the whole contest out of 267 schools.
right,
What are the odds of that,
right.
right?
Yeah, no, and
So,
and and so if right now, I know with Texas Thespians, they're kind of in a big movement to help train uh, administrators and understand our lives as educated theater educators and stuff. Is that one of the things that I experienced when I was interviewing when I first started? Now I think I have a little bit of a reputation, but good or bad, but that I had no pedigree in one act play. And it bothered the heck out of me that I'd go into an interview and that was one of their questions, that maybe it was me, maybe I felt this way, that I felt it held too much merit, too much weight. Um, and do you think that that's something that administrators just misunderstand because it's competition and it's supposed to make your school look good and et cetera, et cetera? Go ahead. I see you're
yes,
stewing.
I do. I, I think I think it does hold too much weight. But the reason is, again, you got to look at the history of the contest.
Right.
The reason it's that way is because there are 1,300 schools that compete in this thing, but probably, I don't know, 800 of them or 900 of them, maybe, uh, are small schools that
Right.
maybe only do the one act play contest. So that's the only thing they have to measure. Plus, our principals are mostly ex athletes or coaches,
Coaches. Yeah.
and they understand winning, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, Look, there are people who say, there shouldn't be competition at all. That's an idiotic idea. I disagree with those people. I mean, we've had every, every profession honors the best work of those people. Lawyers, there are lawyers of the year. There are doctors who, Annie's 7 of her 9 doctors are on Texas Monthly's like Doctors
Yeah.
of the Year award, right? But I think people have misplaced what one act play uh, is, and its value. The root word of competition is, and I don't know if I'll pronounce this correctly, but it's the Latin word petere. Petere, I think is how you say it, which means to strive for something, for excellence. And the preposition com, of course, means together. So literally, competition's defined as, or can be defined as, mutual striving for excellence, and it's process oriented. It should not be outcome oriented. We bring out the best in each other by presenting a worthy challenge, and that means competition is defined by a degree to which all competitors realize their fullest potential. And that's what I like. I don't ever go into a contest thinking, "Oh, I hope Jones High School sucks,"
Yeah.
or "Oh, I hope Smith High School goes overtime." There's no point in that. High tide raises all boats. And so, um, I like the competition. I think it teaches the basic concept of work hard and you will perform better. And having a concrete goal, like a zone competition date, it gives students something to strive toward,
Hmm.
you know? And and then also it allows us to practice disappointment, which is a huge part of life. I mean, especially today with these kids who have this everybody gets a trophy mentality that we've created by, I had my daughter, my oldest daughter was on a soccer team when she was 8. And, they didn't win a single game. And they throw a party and give
Yeah.
them all a trophy. And I told her, I was like, take that damn trophy back to them.
Yeah.
Babu, I got a trophy. And I said, yeah, but we sucked. Our team was terrible.
Yeah.
Our team was terrible. And she was like, so I don't know. I mean, I just think that nothing ever goes as planned, and sometimes you lose. And on those occasions, you can learn to cope with the disappointment, you know?
Yeah.
So, and competition teaches us that other people are good too. Um, it's really losing is a powerful opportunity to model how to deal with and react to disappointment. But, Blake, competition boosts innovation. I mean, if you look at the corporate world, competition among companies spurs inventions and new and better products
Yeah.
and more efficient processes. And that's what I like about it. When I see shows at the state, and this is why I like to go to the state meet. Of course, I live in Austin, so that makes it a little easier. But even when I was in high school, I drove to the state. I skipped my junior prom and let my girlfriend go with my best friend so that I could go to the state meet and watch shows. And that's how you learn, you know? That is how you learn. And also, like, there was an example, I think it was in 2012, this, I guess it was a psychological experiment where these bicyclists, were not professional bicyclists, but just, people who rode quite often. They were
Yeah.
asked to pedal as fast as they could for 2,000 meters on a stationary bike, and they sort of established their personal best baseline, and then they were put in front of a screen and told that within they had an avatar of themselves, and then there was another avatar that they were told was a professional cyclist who was pedaling against them, and they asked them to ride again. In fact, there was no professional cyclist. All they were truly riding against was an avatar of their own personal time, but they didn't know that. And, they all said, I went as fast as I could. I can't go any faster. And yet, when they did it again, 12 out of the 14 were able to beat their previous record. Right. So I think that's one of the real values is
Right.
that it makes you want to be better. Right. And of course, the single most important aspect of one act play, without a doubt, is the constructive criticism that you receive, you know? Because at the core of their growth as a young performer is the valuable instruction that you can glean from the trained eye of an outsider.
Right.
And that's that's why we do what we do.
So that was good. That was yeah, that's why you're on here. But I do want to ask. One of the things that I tell my students, and maybe this is something you believe in as well, but I really, really, really downplay the competition portion of it at our first contest, whether that be zone or district. I try to tell them just go out there and kill it, which I know every director does is, leave it all out on the stage. That's nothing new. But
Yeah.
I really don't glorify the competitive element of it until we advance. And then I say, you've tasted it, now you want it. Now you need to up your game. Now you need to get better. Now you're going to be competing against other schools, and maybe if you make it to by district or area, you're going to be competing against other schools that you aren't familiar with. You don't know their cast. You don't know the students there. Whereas at district and its zone, their boyfriend, like you said, their boyfriends or girlfriends might be at the rival school, and they might know people over there. So it's a little different. Um, do you think that there is something to be said? This is more for me personally. This is a selfish question, so that I know that I'm getting something valuable from one of the legends, not the legend. I don't want to give you that much credit, Billy.
No,
But
please.
but is there something to be said to like not to sort of downplay that first level just so that the kids aren't feeling that pressure, or do you think that the pressure is good to say go out there and this is our goal is to advance, or to say don't worry about advancing right now, leave it all on the stage, and then if they do, you kind of build on that.
Oh, I'm trying to think how we do it.
Yeah.
We usually have, I don't think there is a right way. I think whatever way is best for you is what's best for you. We we traditionally talk about the state meet at the first company meeting, and we say to the new kids who know nothing about it, we say, "Look, this is how the contest works, and you advance. Some schools advance three from zone to district, three from district to by district, three, blah blah blah, two from region to state. So, our goal is to do the best play we can do. If we do that, and if we are lucky,
Yeah.
and those two things collide perfectly, we might be one of the two schools out of 65 in our region that get to the state meet. And we talk about the state meet and that as a goal, and wouldn't that be fun? And then we don't ever talk about it again.
Hmm.
We just say, look, because the focus can't be the state meet. If your focus is state. I remember when I student taught with Jerry Worsham. I asked him one time because he did go to state that year. Hamlet, he ended up getting second, or they ended up getting second. And I asked him one time. I was like, "Hey, Worsham, the buses showed up, the yellow dog buses, and they had painted on the windows, 'Austin is beautiful in the spring.'" And I was like, "What the hell's that all about? What does that mean?" And I was 24. I didn't know anything. And he said, "Well, here's the deal, Billy. I could put state or bust, but if we don't get to state, is it really a bust? I'm not gonna. That's not a bust. We've busted our butts to create one of Shakespeare's masterpieces. A truncated version of it.
Yeah.
And if we don't win a district over in Sweetwater, I don't consider my time spent as a bust. But if you put Austin is beautiful in the spring, and we don't advance, we can still go to Austin.
Right.
Austin will still be beautiful in the spring. And so um, that's how I like to approach it philosophically. I've always remembered that, and that's kind of how we approach things. Um, Getting back to you saying, is there a formula? I don't. We joke too. Yeah, yeah. Let's have some choral speaking, some unison
Yeah.
chanting, some waving of flags,
Right.
and some fog, and right.
Metaphorical
Excuse
blood.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think that. I think you do have to find what works for you. Like our success, we've had a bit of it since 2007. We've been very, very, very lucky, and advanced to the state meet a few times. And when I look back at what all those shows have in common, it's a small cast. And we're at a 6A school. I mean, I grew up in a school where we only did one play a year, and so it was very important to our director that he used 15 actors and the full crew, so as many kids could get involved as possible. Now, the truth is, even at a 6A school, you're not going to have 15 great actors. You're just not.
Yeah.
So, to me, um, our formula has been the sweet spot for us. Seems to be about 7 or 8 actors, um, because I'm not a good and I don't do the directing by myself, but I do have two other coworkers, right? But I know my limits. I am not a very good traffic cop.
Hmm.
I struggle with blocking. I struggle with transitions. So when you do a play like Other Desert Cities or Rabbit Hole, you got 4 scenes. You
Yeah.
don't have transitions per se. And you can concentrate on the acting. And I think, to me, it's not the great acting that your kids do that wins. It's the lack of poor acting. You know, when you watch a show and you're like, wow, there were 8 actors and every single one of them was totally believable. Nobody sucked, even in the smaller roles. That's easier to control,
Right.
and I think it's more impressive. Plus, I'm just not a flash and trash kind of person, quote unquote.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's the that's good. Wise words. The amount of bad acting is I like that. I'm going to take that with me. Pam Wilson taught me when I taught with hers that transitions are everything. So you two, you two
Well,
might get along as far as the directing style
well,
because you'll complement
I
each
I
other.
love I love Pam, and
Yeah,
she's awesome. I will say this: transitions are everything if you
if you're
have a show
good.
full of them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
I mean,
know,
we did last night at
but but
Ballyhoo, and it was all about, the only reason we advanced, according to her, this is her words, is because we had beautiful transitions. But yeah,
hmm. Well, we did that show too, and I think the only reason we advanced was because despite the directing, the acting was good.
yeah.
And that's what I enjoy doing. I love coaching acting. I just think I don't know, I just love it. And I don't know. I guess my advice to teachers is when I go around and do clinics, I always say, look, one act play, I personally, I don't know how you do it. I don't treat one act play as a 39-minute show. I treat it as 39 1-minute shows, and that's how I direct.
Okay. Yeah, I like it. So I'm going to ask you a very simple question. You just said you love coaching acting and being an acting coach and directing acting. Why? Why is it? What? And this goes back to, I guess, your childhood too. And a question along with that is, what is it about theater that bit you? What is it about? You said you grew up in a small town. Your parents kind of, I don't know if they were not supportive. I don't want to. You didn't say that, but they probably didn't
Right.
understand it. Just like my parents didn't really understand it. They weren't theater people, but they were still okay with me doing it. But what was it about theater? Why did you gravitate to theater? And then why are you gravitating to coaching acting and being a great acting director?
Well, I don't know. I didn't say I was a great
I
acting
said it.
director.
I
You
said it.
did.
I'll put on
But
the record. I said it.
oh, well, thank you. I do try. That's what I strive for. But I don't know. I mean, um, I can't tell you. My parents, my dad worked in the oil fields and my mom didn't work. And they sang in the church choir and, you know, theater. Nope, they didn't do theater. I mean, so I don't know. I'm not sure. I think there's just something about moments, one of my favorite quotes from my favorite novel, Look Homeward Angel by Thomas Wolfe. He wrote, each moment is the fruit of 40,000 years. The minute winning days, like flies, buzz home to death, and every moment is a window on all time. And I just think, like, if you, at the end of your life, when you look back at the end of your life, if you're lucky enough not to be taken quickly, and you're ruminating about your life, I mean, what are memories? They are moments. They're little pieces of existence that just stick out for a certain reason. And so when I direct, that's what I try to do is just, plays are empathy machines. Excuse me one second, I have a drink.
That's fine. That's fine.
Play sorry.
Is that your Diet
I
Coke?
usually don't. It is, but it's not from Sonic. I didn't have time to go. Um, plays are simply empathy machines. They're skilled actors, hopefully, knock on wood, you can make them skilled actors, performing skilled writers' words for audiences who can then walk down a path that they never would in actual life. And that allows us to understand people different from ourselves. And I love that. That intrigues me. I want that in my life. I want my kids to do that. I want my children to do that. And so I don't know if that answered your
No, that
question,
did.
but
That
that's
did.
kind of,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that did. I want to get a little bit personal, and this is again, this is my whole podcast. It's called Minor Wisdom because half of it's named after me. The other part is definitely not. But the other part is about the guests. But my wife and I have flirted with the idea of working together one day, right? In an
hmm.
educational setting, we work like we are the worst partners when it comes to upgrading our house or something like that because we're competitive. We both want to like, no, I know how to do this. No, I can do it better. I can. What is the key to the success that you and Annie have had working together? Like, how do you not come home with, I can't believe you did this at work today, or how do you, on the other end, how do you go to work and say, if maybe you had a tiff in the morning, like, wow, I can't believe you like Dunkin' Donuts coffee. That's disgusting. And you go to work and you still hate each other. you know, how do you find the sort of, I guess, I'm at a loss of words, but how do you find that balance of making sure that one doesn't come home or one doesn't go to the work and feeling sort of animosity towards the love of your life? You know what I mean? So
Yeah, well, you marry someone who's better at if you both do the same job, you marry someone who's better at
right,
it than you are.
yeah,
My wife's a great teacher. She's an incredible teacher. Chuck and I, my coworker Chuck Harris, we
yeah,
almost every day when we were in school, I mean now it's different, but when we were actually there all together, we're kind of like, "Damn, have you seen what she's doing in her class? Oh my God, I just feel so
yeah,
incompetent." So that's number one. Is marry someone better. Uh, I'm sure kids would say, yeah, they've seen TIFFs. I mean, we're not unprofessional, but and we do bring it home all the
right,
time. I mean, that's one of the downsides is it's 24/7, because we're working on a play and then we come home and we're making dinner and talking about the play and you know, as far as making it work, I don't know. I mean, I like to basically say when we got married, she kind of said, "Hey, how are we going to do this? I mean, you've been head of this department for 15 years now. We're going to be married." And you know, I said, "Well, I don't
you just made it
whatever. I
work.
mean, I guess we'll just." And she said, "Well, look, we'll just keep doing it the way we do it. You make all the big decisions,
Yeah.
and then I'll make the little decisions." And here we are, almost 20 years later, and I'm amazed that there hasn't been one big decision
Right.
yet.
Right. No, I agree with the married. I mean, my wife is significantly better at education than I am, and if Philip Taylor would back me up on this, if he's listening to this, I'm sure I'll get a text that says "Amen" to that. Um, but it's I think to go back to what you just said about doing a show and then bringing it home and cooking dinner and talking about it. I think that may be part of what makes it work is that you both are, so passionate about a certain project at the time, and why not talk about it, so
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I don't
yeah.
know. I mean, there are examples. We're not the only married couple
Right,
who teach theater. Um, and, the ones I know, they seem to make it work. So I
right.
don't know. I mean, it's really no different when I've had coworkers who weren't my wife,
Chuck.
except that we don't go home together.
Chuck, yeah, Chuck. Yeah,
Yeah, Chuck. And, I've been very blessed. I mean,
yeah,
I've had Chuck and Nick and Tommy and,
yeah.
and Shannon and Sue and, um, I'm sure I'm leaving one or two others out, but yeah, they deserve credit for our success as well.
I know you would not put these words in your mouth too, but and this just popped into my head, and I know you'd appreciate the reference. But are you kind of the Bill Belichick of Texas high school theater? Because
In
you
terms
just
of like a coaching
well
tree,
you just named a bunch of, or a Bill Parcells, even you just named a bunch of names that have, and I know Chuck is currently with you, but he had success before he came to you, but you just named a few names that are just like they've had great success doing what they do now in other spots of the state. Um, you could potentially be that person. I'm not going to say you are, but I should get you a Giants jersey, and you know,
no, 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 no. Definitely not a Giants
no, yeah,
jersey
I
or a
know,
Cowboys
yeah,
jersey.
no, I won't do the Cowboys jersey for sure.
Um, no, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I never think of myself
Yeah,
that way. I never think of myself as anything like that. I just go to work every day and try to be good, because um, I, you know, at when I retire, I hope history writes the verdict of my work based not on any accomplishments that I've had for myself, but
sure,
on what I gave to my students. And I think that should be the focus of every teacher.
right,
It's all about the kids. And the true badge of success for an educator is not medals earned in subjective competitions like the UL One Act play, but a love for the people around us and a passion for what we do and a belief in students' dreams. Uh, Life should be lived with a purpose beyond yourself. And I work every day, and Annie and Chuck, to ensure that Austin High kids see the wisdom of that philosophy. I mean, we even embody it in our vocal warm ups. I learned this from Jerry too. Our vocal warm ups consist, we do the tongue twisters and all that stuff, but it also consists of sayings and quotes and words of wisdom, words to live by that people can take with them. Like, for instance, the Shaw piece. One of my favorite vocal warm ups is let me think for a minute because I haven't done them in 9 months. The great secret, Eliza, is not having bad manners or good manners or any particular sort of manners, but having the same manner for all human souls. In short, behaving as if you were in heaven, where there are no third class carriages, and one soul is as good as another. I mean, God, I wish I had written that. That's
Yeah.
George Bernard Shaw, and it's beautiful and it's true.
Yep.
And when you tell kids that and you believe it and they say it 100 times a year, 4 years, they don't forget that stuff, and it hopefully molds the way they live.
Right.
So that's what we're about at Austin High, sort of giving the gift of possibility and talking about trusting your instincts and following your passions and finding the ability to pursue a life that combines a love of work with a love of yourself. Because, you shouldn't just be a farmer or a director. You should be a man who farms or a man wwho directs, or in the sense of, women too,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
but humanity first. That's our creed. I mean, we're far more. Um, what interests me far more uh, is who they are as a person rather than as a thespian.
Right.
So how do you live a life that matters? Because I don't know. I mean, I think the secret to success in teaching, and God knows I'm not the greatest classroom teacher, but I love my kids, and I would walk through hell in a propane suit for them, and they know that, right? And so surely it must be one of the deepest principles of human nature to want to crave to be appreciated, and they know that we appreciate them, you know? So that's what we do. We try to empower kids to have chutzpah.
Yeah.
I
There you
hope I
go.
pronounced that right. Right?
It's chutzpah, but yeah, you're fine.
Chutzpah. Well, the kids are always kidding me about being Jewish secretly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Secretly.
I
Yeah.
seem to like Jewish
We
plays quite a bit
we would.
because they're so damn brilliant.
Yeah, we would accept you into the tribe. Yeah, you can be an honorary one.
Well, you know what? Not to get philosophical, because I know nothing about Judaism, and I'm being serious here. I really
Yeah.
have not studied religion, but there is something about it that really appeals to me. I mean, I don't even know how to explain it. It's this sense. I grew up going to the Presbyterian church, and I'm not dissing Christians either by any means, but rather than, hey, you better behave so you don't burn in hell. The tenets of Judaism that I've just been, on the periphery of, as far as exposure, seems to be more about doing things because it's the right thing to
Yeah.
do. It's
Yeah.
very morally based.
Yeah,
That
mitzvahs.
appeals to me.
Yeah, it's a mitzvah. Yeah, and in Judaism, we don't believe that there is a hell. We just believe that you're put in a different part of heaven. You're seated
Yeah.
in a different section, if you will. So, but yeah, it's producing mitzvahs and always constantly thinking about the good that you can do rather than thinking about what will happen if you do bad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's awesome. There's a play I want to do called "For This Moment Alone," and I learned that, in the whatever the first page of a book is called, where they have the little inspirational thing. It says it comes from, oh, I forget exactly, but basically it's a little axiom that when you do good for someone else for no particular reason, it was for this moment alone that God created the world. I think that's beautiful.
yeah, it is good. I still have quite a few questions if you don't mind.
Oh, let's go. Let's go.
No, no,
I can.
I love it, but
Let's talk.
you're the first person that I blocked off 2 hours for, so I hope nobody in the previous in my previous interviews is upset by that. But not to say it's going to last 2 hours. Eventually I have to use the restroom because age. But I've got some fun questions that are more like just kind of I want to see how passionate you might get about these things. But then I want to finish up with a couple of the education ones. But you mentioned earlier about, it's about the students, and 100% agree, obviously. Is there a student that you saw struggling, and you don't have to name names, and maybe you do, maybe they're Tom Cruise or somebody famous, but is there a student that you saw struggling in your time during education that you were helping and helping and helping, and they left Austin High uh, still kind of struggling, but then they finally busted through and you saw that they were successful and it just kind of hit you at your heartstrings and stuff, and um, that student has gone on to whatever success is in their definition, doesn't necessarily mean theater, uh, but is there one of those students or multiple students that you could discuss?
Yeah, man, 32 years of teaching, there are,
A lot.
so many students that probably fit some form of that story. I've not had a lot of students go on to incredible success in theater or anything like that. I mean, I have professional actors and directors, but no famous people. Um, God, that's a hard question. Off the top of my head, I will tell this story. Um, I can't remember, despite you saying I have an encyclopedic brain, I can't remember
Yeah,
the play we were
yeah.
doing, but we were doing a play, and I walk outside, and there's this kid sitting on a bench. It's everybody's left, he's like the last one there, and he's sitting on this bench, and he doesn't. I don't know who he is, and he doesn't seem to be having a. There's something wrong. Something just my instinct said something's not right here. Also at that production and still hanging around was a former student who was now in college, and she was just an amazing person, is an amazing person, who is now a minister. She's one of the most fabulous students I've ever had, who moved here as a sophomore, and she was beautiful, and she was a thinker, probably the most brilliant kid I've ever had. And I could tell you stories about her too. Like, for instance, first day of class, I'm giving the lecture. I put up on the board the Rosalind Russell quote: "Acting is standing up naked and turning slowly." And we're talking about what that means as a metaphor. And I'm like, okay, look, don't imagine me, but imagine standing up naked in front of a group of people and like slowly rotating so everyone can inspect you. Like, that's difficult. This is about, I mean, who could do that? And the hand of this beautiful new girl in school goes up and she goes, I could, no problem. And I mean, every boy in class, it was like, oh, you want to go to the prom? She was that kind of, she was
Yeah.
that kind of person, just so sure of herself. And then she had gone to college. Well, she happened to be back to watch this show. And she goes over in this moment of compassion that was really, really beautiful. She goes over, she didn't know this kid either. She goes over and she sits on the bench and she says, "Are you okay?" And I only know this because she told me later. So eventually, the gist of the story is he was really struggling. He was a loner and he didn't feel loved, and I dare say he was probably suicidal. And she went and put her arm around him and started talking. And eventually, I went over and talked to him. And he said, I could never do that. And I love coming to your shows because it's so, I admire these people. And I said, what's your name? And he told me. I'll say John. It wasn't John. But I'm
Right.
like, hey, John, we actually have auditions next week for the next show. Why don't you show up? And he said, nah, I could never do that. Well, he did show up and he did audition and I did cast him. And he was so good. He
Yeah.
was so, so good. And then he went to Southwestern University and majored in theater. And he called me one day and he goes, "Hey, you're not going to believe this. He was adopted. He was Russian." And he said, "Apparently, my history is tailoring. It must run in my family because I've been working in the costume shop and I'm a damn good tailor." And he went on to get a degree in theater. I think he went into finance. I kind of lost track with him, but he told me many times, he was like, that night saved my life.
Yeah.
And I give the credit to Ashley because she's the one who approached him. But yeah, that kind of story, and I'm sure that's not uncommon for people who've been teaching 32 years to have a
Right.
story like that.
Yeah. No, that's cool though. But um, uh, the there are those kinds of stories though that's I mean that's like the gas tank being refilled, you know what I mean? So it's like it's just those
Yeah.
little bits. We do this what
Yeah, they
180 something days a year, but it's that one day or that one moment, and you even said it earlier talking about moments that refills the entire gas tank and kind of keeps you going.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah,
mean, I think that's why we all teach.
yeah,
It's fun to have a hit. It's fun to win state, but that's not ultimately at the end of the year. I always say to the kids, don't let this be your greatest accomplishment.
right,
You know,
yeah,
uh, there are other things to do that are
yeah.
far more important.
So speaking of that, you're really good with these transitions. But but is
Hey,
there
even a blind hog.
is there a play? Because you mentioned earlier about wanting to do a play that and it made me think of the fact, and I don't want to keep harping on this, but you mentioned it yourself that you're getting 3, 4, 5 years in close to retirement, and uh, are there plays that are on your list that you're just not going to be able to hit, but you might be interested in directing, producing once you retire, and kind of keeping that the fine arts, the theater juices going with maybe professional actors or community theater or something like that? Are there plays on that list?
Oh God, I've got a
Hundreds.
I got a lot of plays. Yeah, there are certainly plays. I mean, I mentioned the History Boys. I can't even. I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, you'd almost have to ask me to quit talking. I could name hundreds. I will. There will never be enough time in my life to do everything I want to do regarding directing or telling a particular story.
Right.
Um, and that's kind of sad. It gets to me. My wife says I've been thinking too much too much about death.
Right.
I don't know. I guess it's the times we live in, but all of a sudden, you look up and you go, God dang, I was in one act play in 1978. That was 42 years ago.
Yeah.
It seems like that. And in
Yeah.
that same amount of time, I'm going to be probably dead. And then you kind of get depressed. But then I'm also the type that it pushes me into a corner and makes me want to work. I mean,
Right.
this has been really hard for me because I love working. I really do have a good work ethic, and I love directing, and I love building, and I'm not doing any of that right now, really.
Are you able to do
So
any?
yes,
Yeah. Go ahead.
do you want a title?
I mean,
Do you want a title?
sure. Again, it's a selfish question because maybe one day if you're not able to do it, I might be like Billy mentioned this play one day. Let's check it out.
Well, I just gave away one. Look, I'm not a very territorial person. There are people who keep a list of
Yes.
plays, one act play. I have this play, and I'm not telling you what it is. It's like at convention when it used to be in January. People would say among the high school directors, what are you doing for one act was sort of the big question, and people would say, I'm not going to tell you, or they wouldn't tell
Yeah.
you, or they wouldn't believe you when I would say, Annie and I would say, "Well, we don't know yet," and they'd be like, "You're lying. You're lying. You just don't want to tell me." Well, no, I'm not because I don't pee in a circle around properties. It's not my property. And I'll give you an example. I found a play that very few people know. To my knowledge, I've never heard anyone mention it, and I fell in love with it immediately, and I put it on that list of plays I'm gonna do. Right, but I knew I probably would not ever do it because it's male heavy and blah blah blah. And Travis Poe came to see our production of Spring Awakening, and we were talking. And he was like, "I don't know what I'm gonna do for one act. I have nothing in mind, and I'm looking." And I said, "Dude, I've got a play for you," and I gave it to him, and he had never heard of it, and he did it for one act, but they didn't get to perform it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I drove. In fact, that's the last piece of theater I saw. Annie and I drove to Houston May 31st, I think it was, to see. His administration allowed him to do the play since they never got to perform it. We went and saw it, and I ran into Larry Boff there and the Wisdoms and several other people. So anyway, that play is called Judgment Day by Odon von Horvath, and it's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No,
I'd like
that's
to do that one. So
okay. Yeah, that's it's very true that people kind of hold on, keep things close to the chest are close to the vest, if you will, with protecting their shows. But their shows, they're out there. It's not a secret, but it is what it is. Some people have that kind of mentality and feel maybe they
Well,
feel
well,
threatened.
that's the ugly side of one act play.
Yeah,
That's the side I hate, where people are like that. I get so just pissed at people who use the contest in that manner. I mean, I always tell the kids, look, I don't want you dissing Westlake or Bowie or East Side or any of the schools in our district, because burning down your neighbor's house does not make our house look any better
right,
at all. And there's no reason to do that. You want other people to be good.
right.
That's gonna make us better.
Yeah. If anything, keeping on that real estate metaphor, if the other house looks better than yours, it's going to raise your property value. So, you know, there
Absolutely.
you go.
That's a very good point.
uh,
So,
s-
in terms of, I'm trying to think of other plays. Of course, I didn't make a list. I will
yeah,
tell you the kind. How about? Do you want to know what appeals to me?
yeah, yeah,
The plays that, when I look back at the types of plays I have done, I I think in literature it's called the Bildungsroman, which is the journey of the young person, the coming of age. That has always appealed to me. Some of my favorite plays are plays about young people growing up. Look Homeward Angel, I quoted the novel. I did that play at a summer camp a couple of years ago. I've always wanted to do that play. That, by the way, when I didn't go to my junior prom and I drove to the one act play contest and watched the state meet instead, I saw a production of that play, and I was reading the novel at the time for an English class, and you know I wanted to do that play for, well, since I was a junior in high school, and I did it 2 years ago. So those are the kinds of plays that I like. Plays that are about some sort of journey, or I also like memory.
yeah.
I've always been I've always been fascinated by time and by memory and the role it plays in our lives. So I would say probably, of the 28 plays I've done for one act, probably 6 or 7 of them have been memory plays.
Okay.
Um,
Are you
I don't
are
know.
you a Doctor Who fan at all?
You know what? I've only seen bits and moments of it. My wife loves it,
Okay.
but
Was gonna say
not
because
really.
that's a I mean it's a time travel thing, but going back and forth, but also like we I shouldn't say this on the podcast, but I will. We watched Back to the Future towards the end of the
Mm.
semester because I had a lot of students that were interested in seeing it. I don't know why, but I guess it's one of these popular old new movies now. So we watched that, and they were glued to the screen watching that stuff. But that just it's very random, but it goes along with that time. I guess something with people is fascinated with how would you react if you were sent back to X day,
Yeah,
X century, or whatever. Yeah,
yeah. I also, I don't know. I've always been drawn, always my whole life, to the way events from my life have sort of reconfigured my
right,
emotional landscape and my perception of the world and my memory. And those kinds of plays just intrigue me.
right.
I I, I can't explain it. I mean, I don't know. Why do you like dark chocolate instead of milk chocolate? I don't know.
I mean, it's healthier. That's me.
But it tastes better too. And I've done my share of eating
So,
it, believe me.
speaking of which, you commented on as we record this. I made a Facebook post yesterday about Oreo cookies,
Yes,
and,
yes.
and it got. I mean, I've had a few things blow up in the world of comments, on social media, but that one really surprised me as far as it hit a nerve on quite a few people about what type of Oreo cookie they prefer. Uh, Very
Well,
passionate.
if it's not the original, then they're all wrong.
Right. That's what you said.
You
It's
know,
the right
to,
amount,
for
the
me,
perfect ratio. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm a foodie. I love to cook and I love to eat. And to me, food is all about ratio, especially certain types of food.
Yeah.
I mean, breakfast tacos, and God knows I've eaten my share of them. It's all about the ratio
Yeah.
of egg. Like if you put too much, and I love eggs, but if you put too much eggs in it, it ruins it.
Right.
So it's a ratio thing, and for me personally, double stuffed is just it's just wrong. The original recipe was perfect. You don't need to mess with it.
Yeah, there's a, this is totally off topic, but it's perfectly fine. That's why we're here. But I got into a probably a longer than necessary conversation about Taco Cabana tacos. And I know in Austin there's some very famous breakfast taco spots that people frequent, and I've been to a few. But Taco Cabana tacos, I had a discussion with one of our band directors at my school, actually Taylor Smith, who was at Austin High School student teaching. But
Yes,
anyway,
yes.
so there's a full circle there. But we were discussing about the difference between if you just drive through Taco Cabana individually and get a taco, they're delicious. But if you get the catered version of the Taco Cabana taco, it's tortilla and then a tiny bit of whatever it is it says on the packaging, and it doesn't. If I were to say, hey Billy, you should try these tacos, they're delicious, and then you try the catering version, it's like, well, not this version of it. So, but yeah, it's a ratio thing, proportion. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um,
Anyway.
I guess that's a metaphor for a lot of things, right?
Yes, that that had nothing to do with anything. But so I want to ask a couple fun questions, and
Okay.
uh, I've got to ask about Austin because you've been in Austin now for quite a while, and my family is from Austin. My father grew up in Austin. Went to, oh man, if my sister never listens, but she would know the answer to it. But I don't remember the where he went. But I want to say it starts with an L. Um, uh, in Austin. But
You talking
anyway,
about high school?
yeah, high school. Yeah,
Um,
maybe not an L. I don't.
well, I got to think Johnston. Uh, well, did I don't know if Lhasa existed back
No, I don't
then.
know. That doesn't sound familiar. But I can ask my aunt. I can find out. But I digress. But anyway, I know a lot about Austin too, and I've seen it grow throughout my time on this earth. So, and I heard that. So that's good. I wanted, because this goes to my question. I want you to tell me something about Austin that has changed for the good, and then I need you to choose one thing that has changed for the bad. And you can't say traffic or infrastructure, because I know that is something that Austin
Okay.
struggles with.
Okay. For the bad. Now, this is going to ruffle some feathers. I'm not anti-homeless by any means. I
Right,
mean, it's fair to say I'm a Democrat. We need to help people. We
right,
need policies that will help them find homes and find ways of living. But right now, the city council has a camping ordinance that allows people to pitch tents,
anyway,
and our city has become it's a beautiful city, but parts of it are incredibly ugly because of the trash and the vast amounts of homeless people living in tents underneath
right,
every overpass. I mean, something has to be done. I don't have the answer, and I'm not interested in running for polit- political positions, but that's something that has changed for the worse, I think. Not only aesthetically, but clearly we have an issue with people needing safe housing.
right.
On the upside, I don't know. All this money's coming in. I mean, I've lived here 36 years. I came in 81, and I lived in Granbury for 2 years. I lived in London for a year. I lived in Arlington for 2 years, but mostly I've lived here. And it's still Austin. Austin's just cool. I
Yeah,
mean, where else in the world do you find some bikini clad dude wearing yellow pumps, riding a bicycle,
right.
selling flowers? Or you go into a store and there's a guy wearing a turban and a Denver Broncos jacket reading lesbian erotica. It's just it's just a duck with lips. It's a
Right.
weird place, but it's fun. It's
S-
too damn expensive though.
Yeah, you sound like Matthew McConaughey when you said Austin's just cool. So,
Well, I don't know about that. I don't look like him, and I don't have his money,
well,
and I've
yeah,
never played bongos naked.
yeah,
So,
that's yeah, yeah, it's true. I actually got to had a run in with Matthew McConaughey in of all places Puerto Rico. So Very
Oh,
nice.
wow.
Yeah,
How
not
cool is that?
just completely coincidental. I was there for a wedding, and he happened to. I don't know why he was there, but he happened to be staying at the same hotel we were staying at, and that was just again just
That's cool.
small world. But um, so speaking of Matthew McConaughey, have nothing to do with Matthew McConaughey, but UT. So you are a big football fan, and
Huge.
current
College, not
college,
pro.
college, college, yes. But currently, we're having some issue. Well, first of all, congratulations on your win yesterday as we record this. Uh,
Yeah.
quite the I would say you kind of dominated them, but yeah, yeah. I don't know about number one, but but they were
Oh no,
good.
that was a
Oh,
that was a circular
oh,
motion.
okay, okay, all right. Yesterday they were number one in that game, but who is the greatest University of Texas football player of all time? And I ask you that knowing full well you'll probably say Earl Campbell, but in my opinion, and oh maybe you won't, I don't know, based on your reaction. In my opinion, and again this shows my age a little bit. Uh, uh, there are two that could be considered to be the greatest. Do you know the second that I'm thinking of?
Well, I don't know how well you know history
No, I
because you're a
don't.
lot younger than me. I don't. If it's modern, you're gonna say Vince Young.
Yes. Okay.
If it's older, you could make a case for Tommy Nobis,
Okay. I,
but
I know the name.
but what are you asking me? Who's the
Who's
greatest
the
ever?
greatest University of Texas Longhorn football player in your opinion of all time?
Well, I don't. That's a hard question.
Yeah.
I think you would almost have to say Vince Young. Old timers, and I'm one of them. I saw Earl play. I didn't see him play live, but I was a kid, and
Yeah.
just before I entered, um, he was a man among boys. But
Yeah.
but Vince Young changed the university. I mean, he just he didn't pan out in the pros so much, but he was an incredible athlete. And the thing about Vince was, and I'm a season ticket holder, by the way. I have been since 1994, so I go to every game,
Right.
home game, and I've never seen any person who can just change the feel, the tone of the game. I mean, I'm not a pessimist really, but with regards to Longhorn football, especially in the last 10 years, you just always feel like they're not gonna do it. They're not gonna come back. But Vince, man, you never thought that it was over.
Right.
As long as he had the ball in his hands, there was hope. And that's what college football is all about. Hope springs eternal for everybody who's not a consistent winner, which right now is pretty much everyone except Clemson and Alabama.
Right.
You know, um, so it's about that and coaching.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the coach?
Well, that's the thing about right now. You have Tom Herman, and for me as a University of Houston Cougar, I was so sad to see him go. As far as a football coach is concerned, he's kind of a rough on the edges kind of human, but as far as a football coach is concerned, he changed our program immensely. We were a nationally ranked football team for a while, so. Uh, I'm sure I'd love to talk about the coach, but I might need to get tissues because it might conjure up a tear or two because I was not happy to see him leave.
Yeah, coaching's one of those things. It's about a fit.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the hot commodity, and our boosters and the athletic director, they all jumped the gun to get him because they were afraid LSU was going to hire him, and he was the flavor of the month. And I don't really like the guy. I mean, I don't know him,
Yeah.
but I think he's prickly and
Right.
he's very awkward and he's arrogant, and I don't like any of that. I did think at the time he would turn it around, and I still think he could, but I think at the college level, especially now with the advent of the transfer portal and stuff like that, there's just so many things. I mean, it's not even just the coaching. UT the football operation is a major corporation basically. There's so much more than just the X's and O's, and I don't know if he's up to the task, but I don't. For me, it's just about my team.
Yeah.
People love to hate on UT because they have so much money and blah blah blah. I I'm there. I'm there when we're 6-5 with Charlie, and I'm there when we were,
Yeah.
national champions with Mac, and I will be there until I move to North Carolina, apparently. uh, so people get very passionate about it, but um, I don't know.
Do
It
they
is
get
what it is, and
do they give coaches enough time to turn programs around?
not anymore.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Yeah.
hell no. I mean, if you think about it, there are people who want his job. They want his head on a platter.
Yeah.
But if you look, and I am not suggesting that he is Mac Brown or he is as good as Mac Brown or as Dabo Sweeney or Nick Saban or
Right.
whoever. Clearly, no one's as good as Nick Saban. But his 4-year record is almost identical to Dabo Sweeney's.
Right.
It's almost identical. In fact, I think it's a little better than Mac Brown's. And he's won 4 bowl games.
Right.
Now, 4 against our arch rival OU. But he may get it turned around. It may be a case where 2, 3 years from now, we're saying, you know what? He came perilously close to losing his job, and look what he's done now. But people, that's the world we live in, Blake. People want immediate gratification. They don't want to wait. Um,
Right.
so, but then again, I don't really feel sorry for him. I mean, he makes $6 million a year,
Yeah. He's doing
so
okay. And in
yeah.
Austin, that buys you a nice little 3-bedroom, quaint place, right?
God, isn't it the truth, man? I tell you what. And you know what's really weird? Getting back to theater is how poorly Austin pays.
Right.
Um, Anne took a $12,000 cut when she came here to marry me,
Right.
and Nick Mills, whom I taught with, is now back in the Houston area. He got like a $10 or $12,000 raise, plus his rent went down $300 a month, which
Yeah.
is another 3,600. It's crazy how expensive it is here, but people want to live here and they know they can get away with it. Plus, we send like $540 million of money away to other schools because we're taxed, because we're considered a rich district.
Right. Yeah. I was hired in your
Yeah.
district, and ended up turning it down because of the financial element of things. But again, if Philip Taylor is listening to
Yeah.
this, I'm sure I'll get a text about that as well. So, but anyway,
Well,
so I wanna go ahead and wrap things up with you, but it would be I would be doing a disservice if I didn't ask you about your podcast and you and Annie's podcast. And I talked to Annie about this on her episode, on her interview as well. Uh, I can give you my reasons for loving to do this like sitting here and chit chatting and kind of back and forth with theater people, whether they be first year teachers or experienced teachers, if you will. What is it about you doing that podcast after piece with Annie, and then every once in a while you guys bring in a guest, but it's not necessarily, the format isn't necessarily the interview process like I have. It's more about the classroom and uh, giving advice and telling stories about your experiences in the classroom, and maybe hopefully helping. I would say even it caters more towards the inexperienced teacher to kind of say, hey, here are the mistakes we made. Here are some solutions that you could use and take with you so that you're not also repeating history. What is it about that podcast that you kind of find passionate and love about it? And you can't say Annie drags me into it. That's not an answer that I will accept on here.
okay. Well, Annie did drag me into it, but here's the deal. I love talking to people, and I love teaching, and I love learning from people, and so that's what we get from it. I mean, I would prefer, to be honest, I would prefer your format. Uh, we didn't do your format because you're the original, and what there's no point. Um, I like and this, it's really a reflection of how we teach. This is how I teach. Show, hey Billy, call me tomorrow morning at 8 on Zoom. We'll talk. That's kind of how I teach. Annie is, I've got a unit, and I've got a daily lesson plan, and I've got a beginning and an ending, and she's very organized and very the X's and O's of teaching. She's great at it. I'm not. I'm not at all. But we decided that that's really the part people need help with, you know? I mean, in terms of being inspirational, which is part of what teaching is, you kind of either are or you're not. You can get better at it, but you know what I mean? It's kind of either
Yeah.
part of who you are or you're not so charming. Um, and but the X's and O's you can get better at. And we have found from doing in-service and stuff that people want that, especially newer teachers. So that appeals to me, helping. I've always liked to help people. I don't know where that comes from. I guess it was kind of the way I was brought up. You should try to help people.
Right.
And, you know, I believe personally, I mean, I could teach a sea lion to climb a rope if he's willing. But, you know, I want to help other teachers inspire their kids and teach their kids. And this is a way that we can do that, you know. And occasionally, I mean, I don't know how successful we'll be or it has been, but every now and then we get a letter or an email from somebody who says, you know, hey, I'm listening from, you know, Oklahoma, and you've really helped me. And that's
Yeah.
that makes me feel good.
Yeah. So I want you to end on this. You mentioned your time with Jerry a couple of times and some things that you took away from that. And there might be a pregnant pause here. There might be a little bit of time that we hear nothing. Um, but I want you to think about and try to narrow down all of the advice that you received during that time and try to give me one bit of advice that has stuck with you that you would love to stick with others and that you think that is invaluable to, and it doesn't have to be theater related, doesn't have to be education related. It could be being a man, and again, like you said earlier, not man but human. It could be anything related to that. What is one thing that you would love to bestow upon others that Jerry bestowed upon you?
I could write a book about this.
Maybe that's
That's a really
maybe there you go. That's an avenue you need to explore.
well, yeah. We didn't even talk about that. I there are several books in my head that I
Right.
want to write, but you know, um, gosh, Blake, I don't. I'll just tell you some. I don't know if I can boil it down to
Okay.
one,
That's
but
fine.
um, I learned that y- kids don't become champions when awards are announced. They become champions in hundreds of hours that they spend preparing for that moment. That's one thing I learned. I learned that theater teaches what they now call soft skills, discipline and punctuality, and the ability to absorb criticism and the ability to read people like a book. And those are going to help every young person as they move through life, even if they don't do theater. Um, I learned, gosh, just think. I mean, he didn't sit down and say these things. It's just I've sort of
Yeah, it's just
extrapolated them
yeah,
from the way
right.
he works. That you know, work ethic. I tell my kids all the time, you have to do what others will not do, so that tomorrow you can do what others cannot do.
Right.
Um, that the the polish will always come, but the important thing is to craft the honest pair of shoes. I mean, things like that, and I didn't make that up.
Right.
I'm sure I read that somewhere. But those kinds of things, and to never stop learning, never be so full of hubris that you think you can't learn. I mean, I always tell the story. At the end of his life, Michelangelo, uh, they asked him, you know, do you have a motto, and it was "Ancora imparo," which is Italian, I think, or Latin for "and still I learn." You know, there have been some great accomplishments
Right.
done by people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and you can't um, downplay that. You can't just stop living life and learning and think you know it all, because because you're wrong,
Right.
right?
Right.
Let's see. I don't know. I don't know. Ask me a different question.
No,
That's too
that's
hard.
good. That's good.
That's too hard. Okay. I'll sum it up this way.
All right, go.
He 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 inspired me to inspire my kids to be bold.
Right.
And that, I think, when you talk about acting and making choices, that's very, very important. But just living life in general, you got to be bold. You got to be as bold as the first woman who ate an egg or an oyster. You need to live your life out loud. You need to have the originality of the splatter of a Jackson Pollock, and you do that by leaving the sort of metropolis of your comfort and going out into the wilderness of your instinct and live life creatively. So um, he taught like that. Blake, I never saw him give a lesson. I
Okay.
would go in the mornings, and he would bust out a stool and take it out in front of his um, class and sit on it, and they would just talk. I mean, that's what they did. I never saw him do scenes. I don't. It was the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed. I know it's the greatest teaching I've ever seen, but it wasn't like anything I'd ever seen
Have
before.
you adopted that?
And it kind well, I have, and it screwed me over because when you start, you don't know what the hell you're doing. They
Right.
give you a shingle and say you're a teacher, and I went through my first lesson plan in about 12 minutes, and I'm looking at the
Yeah.
clock in my classroom in Granbury, going, "Oh my God, I'm finished," and I got 34 minutes to fill.
Right.
Um, so it took me about 6 or 7 years to find my way, and I
Yeah.
started just by imitating the people I admired, and he was number one on that list. So um, yeah, I mean, but how do you really learn? How do you learn to be a good teacher?
Right.
You know?
Right. I mean, experience. that's that's my thing.
Yeah,
And I agree with that. That because the same with me when I first started teaching, uh, I I busted. It's a time management thing. 100%.
yeah.
So, but yeah, that's good. So then the final question, and we'll leave on this, and it can be again a pause if you need if you need it.
Oh my God, here it comes.
So let me. I think we're both stricken by allergies. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna go back to the UT thing. Uh, what is something from the Ruth Denny days? Because Ruth Denny holds a dear place in my heart, and you mentioned this right at the very beginning about she was she is the reason that HSPVA theater is even a thing, and started the whole program, and all that stuff, and it's near and dear to my heart. I never met her. I know she was in attendance at a couple of events that I had some friends at. I never got to experience a Ruth Denny story or anything like that. What is a Ruth Denny piece of advice or story? And this is a similar question to what I just asked, but it's a nostalgia thing for me to hear about Ruth Denny. What is something from the Ruth Denny days that could go in one of your books? And I know you briefly mentioned, you've got books, just you've got probably files of books stored away somewhere, whether that be metaphorical or literal. But what is something from the Ruth Denny days that you think is has been forgotten and needs to kind of just be out there? Because I personally think, and maybe this is just me, maybe this is my perspective, but the Ruth Denny stories, the Ruth Denny uh, uh, aura in Texas theater is kind of fading away. It's like the movie Coco. It's like we're forgetting about her. Her picture is no longer on the, well, I say mantle, but I know that's not the correct term, but it's not as admired as it used to be. What is it that we should consider about Ruth Denny that keeps her memory alive and well and strong and healthy?
Oh gosh. Um, Ruth Denny was just a force to be reckoned with. If those of you out there listening, if you don't know who she is, look her up. I mean, they're on the internet. You'll find things about what she did for theater, not only at HSPVA and the University of Texas, but in the state of Texas and nationally. Um, it's funny because time messes with you. You forget things. You think, oh, I'll remember. I remember, by the way, my mother telling me, "You should keep a journal. You should keep a journal of your teaching." And I didn't, and by God, I wish I had, because you forget the stories. I want to write a book about one act play
Right.
directing, and I can remember some stories from my career, but there are things I know I've forgotten, important things. And I didn't write down stories about Mrs. Denny, and so I've
Right.
kind of forgotten them too. But I will tell you, one thing she told me that I've never forgotten is she said, uh, "There is no such thing as high school theater or children's theater. When you label them as such, you take away from their power. There are simply two kinds of good theater, Billy. There's good theater and there's bad theater, and you're not allowed to do the latter." And,
It's good.
and it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. There's really, I mean, what does that mean? Children's theater. I
Right.
mean, I don't know. I'm not a big children's theater fan. I haven't done a lot of it, but if you're going to do plays for children or with children, they got to be good.
Right.
you know and then the other thing is, I remember a story she told she told us once. We had a play directing. It was called directing the high school play. What it really was, she would bring in donuts and orange juice, and we'd sit around and listen to her tell stories. She would hold court. I don't remember directing a whole lot in her class, but she was a UIL critic judge, and Mrs. Denny was like Simon Cowell. I mean, she straight up gave you the straight dope, and if you didn't like it, too bad. And I remember one time, and this was prior to the Tom Hanks movie about baseball with the famous line in it. But she told us she was giving a critique somewhere out in West Texas at a small school, and this girl started crying, and Mrs. Denny said, I was just so angry and so upset with that young lady. And I just snapped my finger and I said, "Young lady, if you're going to cry, you just go to the bus, because there is no crying in one act play." And I can see her saying it, you know, and there's truth in that. There shouldn't be any crying in one act
Right.
play. And if your kids are crying when they don't advance, then you haven't taught them well.
Minor wisdom.